So I recorded this video a couple days after the movie came out. It's been a month. This movie still sucks. Yo, that being said, just please get my watch time up. Expect no kind of snappy editing. I really stopped caring halfway through talking about this mess. But like, I mean, if you enjoy a healthy amount of max prestige hating, stick around. Anyway. So The Flash has been out for a couple days now, and yeah, this is just gonna be a full spoiler review. I feel like I can't talk about this movie in its entirety without talking about crucial points in the plot and in the story, because that's really where this movie flops at, and it's showing. It's showing badly. Every social media advertisement, every television advertisement was to paint the narrative that this movie was going to be movie of the year, hyping this thing to be able to be a hit, slapping Michael Keaton's face all over these trailers just so that you can get a bit of a nostalgia bait. But would you look at that, this movie got less money than Black Adam, and that says a lot. But man, this was bad. For one, I found myself to be a really huge fan of when directors of horror movies move on to directing superhero films. It's been done many times before. James Wan, Sam Raimi, and now Andy Muschietti. But yeah, after watching The Flash, I feel robbed. The Flash is probably the most hand-fisted CGI mess of a contrived story that I've ever watched in my entire life. I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this video, because I know there's some people who agree with me and absolutely hate this movie, but I'm also very aware of the fact that some people actually adore this movie and find it quite entertaining. I am not here to convince you one or the other. I am simply here to share my opinion and the reasons for why I have this opinion. That being said, alright, let's get this part out the way. I've never been sold on Ezra Miller as the Flash. I've never found that Ezra encapsulated any of the characteristic traits about Barry Allen, or at least not as well as I expected them to be. In this movie, he has a couple of emotional beats, and I think that they were actually not terrible, in my opinion. I think that some of them felt earned, which I can't say about most of the things in this movie, but it does not help with all the charges this man has had in the last year, so controversy around his name has not helped at all regarding making his Flash look any better. The whole time I was watching this movie, I felt like I was just watching a pedophile play the Flash. Man's real life could have just auditioned for Eobard Thawne. And for those of you who don't get what I'm saying, this was Ezra Miller. Now this is Ezra Miller. And because of those charges, it just made a lot of certain writing decisions and certain lines in the script in particular not age very well. Looking back on the fact that this man has publicly assaulted several women at local bars in Hawaii and groomed a child since she was 12, then kidnapped her for several days or weeks. Honestly, I don't remember. One day is too many if you ask me. And on top of all of that, no glazing, of course. I'm just used to the CW's Flash. I think Grant Gustin just encapsulated the character miles better than I think Ezra ever had the potential to, which is completely fine. But in all honesty, I think the only thing Ezra has on Grant Gustin is how fast he can run from the police. But in general, a movie called The Flash, I was never sold on the actor who plays The Flash, and that's before all the crimes. But that doesn't mean I wasn't sold on all the actors. I mean, to list a couple good ones, I think Ben Affleck made a really good return in this film. I also found myself really enjoying Supergirl, which is why I'm so disappointed that she was just a plot device, more of a MacGuffin to drive the story forward, due to the fact that the main antagonist, if we can even call even if we can call Zod an antagonist in the film, because he really is just there. He is just there to have a big CGI fight at the end of the movie like most of these films do. It's getting so old, because as far as this lazy trope goes, this has to be one of the worst executions of it that I've seen done in a really long time, and that should never happen. You have two speedsters, a Kryptonian, and Michael Keaton's Batman, like, just for the climax of the movie to feel so dull. And I realize why. I do realize why. The story was so contrived. The ending didn't feel earned. It felt like events really just happened. It lacked so much structure and tonal balance, and don't get me started on the pacing. And the sad thing is, I think a movie like The Flash can have a really interesting play on how the film is paced. But unfortunately, this film is such a cobbled mess that it doesn't really get to have fun with any of that. And in the end, it just feels genuinely disjointed and not very well put together, which is really a shame with how much potential this movie had. I did not want to hate on this film. I genuinely did not. The Flash is one of my favorite comic book characters, and I think one of the most interesting comic book characters that can be adapted to film, television, animation, etc. But I feel like this was such a lazy attempt, which is a shame, because that movie is about a decade old and is a cartoon. This movie could have taken so many liberties with the, first of all, cinematic universe that they've already established. No matter what you think of it, no matter if you like the DC extended universe or not, they could have taken way bigger liberties with that universe and utilized as characters that we've already grown to know over the years. But The Flash does none of that. Instead, they just ride the wave of this multiversal trend that's been plaguing so many superhero movies in the last 5 years. And that's not me saying I don't enjoy these kinds of films. The Spider-Verse movies do it very well, but that's because they put their characters first and the multiversal plot after. The multiverse is in service of the characters, not in reverse. Doing it backwards makes for lazy writing. Doing it backwards makes for contrived storytelling, is followed by poor execution, and doing that makes for a movie like The Flash. A movie with, I think, a good director who at times can make for very good visuals when CGI is not involved. This statement is getting thrown around a lot regarding this film, calling it the ugliest movie they've ever seen. I actually beg to differ. I think this movie has the ugliest CGI I've ever seen, at least with a movie this recent. But when the effects are out the equation, I think this movie can look pretty well. And the same thing goes for the costume. I've been nagging on the Flash's costume since you saw me react to the second trailer. On paper, I get what they were going for, and I genuinely think it can look nice with decent lighting and with not so heavy on the CG. But when this thing is just completely encapsulated by nothing but computer generated images, it looks like garbage. The running looks stiff and awkward. The helmet looks like Photoshop, and it doesn't even look like a real person is wearing it. It is bad enough that I have to call the person wearing it a hero. That's the biggest joke of this movie. Actually, I lied. That's the fan service. The fan service in this movie is just so distasteful. Obviously spoiler territory, but we get to see poorly rendered models of who's on the list, and I'm sure a few more that I can't think of at the moment, which is bad enough because this was their selling point. The fact that their fan service moment that was supposed to get as much nostalgia and leave you with a wow, I got to see my favorite character in this, I can't even really recollect of because of how unmemorable it was and just how empty it was. Nothing about it was earned. You can tell it was just to be a wow, look what I saw moment. And for obvious reasons, that just doesn't work in a movie like this. And it felt so last minute. It felt so blah. I guess it was supposed to show Barry the consequences of his actions, that the simple tampering with time that he made, that it had this big effect. But we should feel it way more on a personal level rather than just seeing these poorly rendered models of characters we see just, you know? I did laugh though when we saw George Clooney. I won't even lie. But as a whole, the best way I can describe this movie is things just kind of happen. Yeah, I hated the other Barry. I just wanted him to stop talking so much. And there's a specific scene, and there's a scene in particular where Supergirl talks about hope or whatever with Barry, and he just butts in, and it's so annoying. Like, I just wanted the scene to play without him talking. They kept killing Kara over and over again, man. One of the only characters who I could say that I had little to no problems with that being Supergirl, they kept killing her on repeat, man. And the same goes to Michael Keaton's Batman, who I oddly enough kind of enjoyed. I think he was okay. I'm not gonna say that he saved the movie, although I know that these Warner Bros execs were praying to God that he could save, but I genuinely think he was just pretty alright, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's not to say I didn't enjoy him. I'm not saying pause, wait, hey, yo, enjoying him, what are you oh yeah, I didn't even mention this movie. To me, at least, this movie really has like no villain. Like, you can call Zod an antagonist. He's also just a plot device. He's not. He's just kind of there, which has like 3 minutes of screen time tops, and it's just the other Barry after trying to fix the timeline on repeat. But he ends up killing his past self after, you know, we just learned about this, which just erases him from existence right after. So like, there you go. There's nothing. There was like absolutely nothing to explore with that character, which is sad. I feel like that should have been more prioritized than, you know, the poorly rendered fan service. But yeah, I feel zero tension or stakes due to the fact that we had little to no antagonist. And I don't think the ending of this movie does it any better either. After we do get an actually quite emotional scene with Barry and his mom, the one payoff I will say that this movie has is his dad being a free man. That is it, which I think was the one part that I feel as if the writers, the director, and even Ezra Miller cared about. And I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but if maybe the movie was more centered around Barry's motivation with wanting to get his dad out of jail and the trauma he carries due to the loss of his mother, I feel like it could have been a way more heartfelt story. While they did have a decent payoff with Barry and his dad, I still felt like the ending wasn't earned as a whole. And what I mean by that is that it just didn't feel as well put together as I thought it should have been. And I didn't know why at first, but then I read that there were 3 different endings for the movie. There is a 4-hour cut of this movie and about 3 different endings for the film that are just somewhere. One with the rest of the Justice League, and I think one with Michael Keaton's Batman still alive. Because if I'm not mistaken, at the time they were trying to make him this universe's main Batman before James Gunn came and just said, you know what, we're scrapping all of this and starting new. Which, thank God. But yeah, that's all I gotta say about this one. It's not terrible. It's not as bad as like Batman v Superman or Suicide Squad, but at least those movies were kind of memorable for being bad. This one was just kind of mediocre and lame and made me feel nothing. You can have fun watching a bad movie. I watch ridiculous films all the time, but this one just left me feeling hollow. And it doesn't help that this movie, to me, feels like it has 0 rewatch value, which is sad. I've always wanted a Flash movie. Unfortunately, this is the one we got. So with that being said, I'm gonna have to give The Flash a 5 out of 10.